Hey everyone, and welcome to Empowered by Self-Love, the podcast. My name is Jessica Fuentes, and I am a certified professional coach. I will be here every Saturday talking about transformation. How to transform those difficulties you encounter throughout your life into lessons. How can you transform that victim mindset into one of opportunity and growth? If you want to transform your life, the key is to learn and realize that you have everything you need within yourself. If you are looking for a safe place to find inspiration, motivation, and the tools to become empowered, then this is the podcast to listen to. This podcast is brought to you by my website, Empowered-SelfLove.com. Thank you for joining me every Saturday, and I want to thank you all for listening every week. Thank you for your support and for making Empowered by Self-Love, the podcast, part of your Saturday routine. I am extremely thankful and grateful for your warm welcome. My hope is to bring you the tools that enriches your life and that helps you become more empowered. So thank you for sharing with your friends and family, and let's continue to spread the knowledge and the inspiration. Hey there, everyone. Happy Saturday to you all. I wish for you to feel well, energetic, and ready for today's episode. Today, I wanted to talk about moving on. I have spent plenty of time thinking about this topic because this has been something I have struggled with most of my life. So the best way I found to approach it is by breaking it down into three main questions to ask yourselves. Number one, why is it necessary to move on? Number two, from what and from who should you move on from? And number three, how do I actually move on? So if you're a person of your word, like myself, or if you're a person who's committed, then you might relate the idea of moving on to giving up or associated with not caring anymore. But that is far from the truth. So let's go with the first question. Why is it necessary to move on? Moving on becomes a necessity when you constantly find yourself stuck in relationships or in situations in which you feel drained, frustrated, sad, angry, or stuck. Those emotions are hinting you that there is something wrong in the situation or in the relationship that you're in, and that something needs to be done. In some cases, these emotions flow and they go away. In some other cases, a conversation takes care of the problem and you continue on with your life, with the relationship, and nothing changes. But when these emotions remain constant and you feel like they are affecting your performance or your presence amongst others, or if you are constantly feeling stuck, then that is when it is the right time to consider moving on. Moving on from situations and from people because they are not serving you well. They are becoming a burden. They are becoming a problem for you. So this information that you're acquiring from your own emotions is very important because when making a decision of this magnitude, you really need to know that it is necessary. So this emotions are the information you need, and the consistency of the bad behavior or the consistency of the bad feeling is your sign. Now, this leads us to the second question. From who or from what should you move on from? We shouldn't move on from toxic environments. And what is a toxic environment? By definition, it refers to a setting, often in a workplace or any other social setting, where negative behaviors and attitudes prevail, leading to stress, conflict, and overall unhappiness.
So some key characteristics of a toxic environment include poor communication, because there's a lack of clear and open and even honest communication. Another characteristic is high levels of stress. If you constantly feel pressured and there are unrealistic expectations from yourself, then that is a toxic environment. Another characteristic is lack of support. If there is minimal encouragement or minimal assistance or even no assistance at all from colleagues or leaders, that's another sign. Negative attitudes is another one, but negative attitudes that are consistent, like persistent negativity, gossiping, backstabbing. And lastly, unfair treatment. If you notice that there's favoritism or discrimination or bullying, those are characteristics of a toxic environment. So anything that is associated with these characteristics, you should move on from, because it is definitely not serving you well. On the contrary, it is hurting you and it is generating destructive emotions upon yourself. Another way or another thing we need to move on from are abusive environments. And what characterizes an abusive environment? Well, physical abuse, of course, any type of physical harm or threat. Emotional abuse, and that includes manipulation, intimidation, constant, that's the key word here, criticism that undermines your self-worth, your self-esteem. Psychological abuse is another one. Gaslighting, isolation, these controlling behaviors that you cannot do this, you cannot hang out with this person, or indirectly limiting your socializing with others. Another one is the verbal abuse, which includes insults, yelling, derogatory comments, anything that it's verbally diminishing yourself. Now, as you hear me describe what an abusive behavior is, and you think to yourself, hold on a second, I have yelled at my kids before, and I have criticized my friends or my siblings or whoever. Look, nobody's perfect, and you cannot expect perfection. So long as you don't behave like this to the point in which you are affecting the mental stability or emotional stability of a person, then you're fine. We're all human, and we also get angry and we tend to judge at some point. So don't be so hard on yourself. What I'm trying to say is that when these behaviors become harmful, threatening, and dangerous, that is when you need to move on and move away from this type of people. Lastly, I can say that it is best to move on from certain romantic relationships. These days, relationships are harder than before. Relationships have always been hard, but now it seems like people lack commitment. People tell half-truths or full-blown lies. And if you notice that your romantic partner is disrespecting your relationship and your trust, I will also say that that is a sign of someone you need to move away from, because you don't belong in that relationship. So yeah, it might sound easier said than done. Of course, it always does. Of course it's gonna be hard. Of course it requires time to make a big change in your life, and it requires trying multiple times before you actually get to move on from any of the situations that I mentioned. But when you have exhausted all of your resources and things don't improve for the better, and you continue to feel emotionally, physically, or mentally affected by a person or a situation or a workplace, then it is time. And this leads us to the final question. How do I actually move on? Look, there are many ways to do so. I'm going to mention a couple of steps that I consider were helpful for me in similar situations as the ones that I have mentioned before. So the first step is to try. Of course, as I mentioned, you need and you have to exhaust all reasonable resources and try. Because if you don't try, you might carry a sense of guilt afterwards. But when things don't resolve after trying and the situations don't improve, then it is time to take the second step towards moving on. And that is to create a plan. You need to plan your exit. The same way you plan a wedding, the same way you plan to apply for jobs, to get ready for an interview, the same way you plan to meet new people or to hang out with your friends or even plan a trip. You make a plan. This way you have options and you have direction. And in case something doesn't go as planned, you can have multiple options within that plan. The third step is to seek help. In some cases, you will need professional help, even legal help. And in some other cases, the help you need is to have a support system, meaning your family and your friends. When you become your priority, you begin a new journey in your life, and you are taking the steps that will lead you closer to a healthier and happier life. Don't allow your feelings or your fears to become your priority. You are your priority. Steve Maraboli said, letting go means to come to the realization that some people are part of your history, but not part of your destiny. Now, the 5 takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, recognize the need. Understand that moving on becomes essential when a situation or a relationship consistently leaves you feeling drained or stuck. Number 2, identify toxicity. Be aware of environments with poor communication, high stress, lack of support, negativity, and unfair treatment, and recognize the necessity to move away from these. Number 3, acknowledge abuse. Distinguish between normal human flaws and harmful behaviors. Move on when you recognize persistent physical, emotional, or psychological abuse. Number 4, plan your exit. Ensure you try your best within toxic relationships. But if there is no improvement, create a detailed plan to move forward to avoid guilt and unnecessary uncertainty. And number 5, prioritize yourself. Always put your mental, physical, and emotional health first in your journey to find a healthier and happier life. Another quote I like to share with you today, and this one is from an unknown person. And it says, moving on doesn't mean you forget about things. It just means you have accepted what happened and continue living. So moving on is not just about leaving behind the past. It's about creating an opportunity for a new, fulfilling chapter that aligns with your true self. Remember, while it may seem intimidating, frightening, and even overwhelming, the path to new beginnings start with small and deliberate steps. So embrace the courage to make yourself a priority, because life is too precious to stay in a place or with people that represses your growth. If you feel that this is a message you connected with, I am very glad and happy that this will be the beginning of an extraordinary journey of transformation and empowerment for you. So remember that we have a date every Saturday. You can't miss the next episode, which will be the second special episode of the season, and the topic will be the journey within, letting go, learning, and loving yourself. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it and that it brought some perspective as well as hope. If there is any particular topic you would like me to discuss, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email at jessica.fuentes@empowered
empowered-selflove.com. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find me there as empowered.selflove. I also encourage you to visit my webpage, empowered-selflove.com, and explore more about what coaching is all about. In the Services tab, you can sign in for the free discovery session, which is only available on Wednesdays. During the discovery session, I will explain everything you need to know about coaching, the type of coaching I specialize in, and the packages I have available for you. You can find all the links on the episode's notes. Remember, if you like this content or thought of somebody that could benefit from it, please share it with your friends and family. Remember that we have a date every Saturday, and I can't wait for us to meet again. See you next week!